So, something a bit different today. As you can see, it's not much of a book. More of it's literally a novella. It's only 75 pages. It's Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I always want to say Metamorphoses, which is Ovid, but it's not Ovid. It's this guy. So it's only 3 chapters. It's very short. Essentially, this guy in the early 20s, it was published in 1915, so 1915's Germany, wakes up. He's a young guy, he's a working guy, he's a traveling salesman. He wakes up and he's late for work, he notices. His alarm didn't go off. Alarm? I don't even know if they have alarms back then. No, I think he does have an alarm, because it doesn't go off or it didn't wake him up. Anyways, he finds out that he's transformed, he's metamorphosed into a monstrous vermin, or a horrible vermin, I think this translation uses, which is sort of like the bug on this cover. I pictured it as like a cockroach, like a giant 3-foot long cockroach. So this is a bit of a shock to him, but I don't know if magical realism is the appropriate. I use the term magical realism for anything when there's very strange, magical, otherworldly, not natural phenomenon occurring, and the people in the world sort of take it in strides and just sort of go with it. So yeah, he's turned into a giant cockroach, and all he can think about is, oh, I'm late for work. Can I get the 7 o'clock train? Like, what is my boss gonna think? He's really focused on his job and not his physical situation. So he struggles to get out of bed. He finally manages to get himself out of bed. It's a struggle because he's a cockroach, or whatever, a vermin. He hears his boss show up at his house, because like I don't want to get Marxist about this, but it's just this I don't know how much of this is the story or if that's just what life was like back then, but the fact that he's supposed to be to work at 5, and because he wasn't there at 5, by the time 7 o'clock rolls around, his not boss, but his supervisor shows up at his house and was like, talks to his parents like, oh, we're very concerned, like, he's late for work, what is going on? Anyways, his whole family, they're sort of beating on the door, asking him like, what's going on? You got to get out of bed. Like, are you sick? Even if you're sick, you should still be going to work. And his boss is like, this is like, I might have to fire you for this. This is just crazy. It's 2 hours and you're not at work yet. Anyways, so he tries to communicate with them, and at first, like the first few times he tries to sort of communicate through the door, I thought that they could understand him, and I don't know if they could initially, and over the course of the next few pages, the transformation sort of completes and then they can't, or probably more likely it's right from the get-go is they can't understand him. He just sort of makes sort of animal screech noises, but he can still understand them. So anyways, he tries to communicate with them. They kind of all go quiet on the other side of the door and sort of eventually and just like freak out. The daughter, or his sister, goes to get the doctor, and his mother goes to get the locksmith to try and unlock the door, but he manages to unlock the door with his mouth, and the door opens and they all see that he's sort of like a cockroach, as I imagine it. And at this point, they kind of react as you would expect, I guess. They don't like take it in strides. Maybe, like I said earlier, like they kind of freak out. The supervisor from work kind of runs for the door, and he's Gregor. That's the main character. He's trying to rushing to the supervisor. He's trying to, so he can explain the situation to him, and he's like, no, I'll be back to work in like an hour. Don't worry about it. I can solve all this. Like, he's not worried about how can I change myself back. How has this happened to me? He's just concerned about his work and keeping the job. And we find out that it's sort of because his father, about 5 years ago, went out of business, or his business collapsed or whatever, and so Gregor's is the sole source of income for the family, and he's worked his way up in this business. He's a traveling salesman now, and he's making enough money to keep the whole household going. So without him, like, his work is extremely important to him, for his family's survival. So that's the first sort of chapter, is an introduction, I guess, to him in his current state, and his family's introduction to him in his current state. They all freak out. The father sort of herds him, or corrals him back into his room. They slam the door and lock his bedroom door, and that's sort of the end of the first chapter. And the second chapter is more of him getting used to his sort of new life in his new body. He sort of hides under the couch in his room because he feels more comfortable, and sort of like a place where you'd expect sort of a giant beetle to live. His sister seems to, I don't want to say take pity on him, but she feeds him and cleans his room out and sort of looks after him in a way, but she's still sort of so horrified and disgusted by him that she doesn't want to look at him, and he sort of has to hide under the couch, and he eventually brings one of the blankets and drapes it over the couch so that they can't even see him, his like body peeking out from underneath it. And his sister, every time she goes in, she has to run to the window and open the window and like stick her head out and breathe. Like, I don't know if that's a smell thing or sort of a claustrophobia thing of her being stuck in with him. Yeah, so there's some sort of sympathy from his sister initially that he doesn't seem to get from the rest of his family. In fact, his sister notices that he likes to climb the walls and the ceiling, but the furniture in his room sort of prevents that, so she and her mother go and try and move some of the furniture out so that he has more access to walls and stuff, which he's grateful for at first, but as his room's being made bare, he sort of has like I don't know, if not an anxiety attack, but he has this weird moment where he's like, no, they're taking all my stuff, and like I've had this stuff for so long. This is my stuff. This is the desk that I use for work. And so he sort of jumps up and tries to cover one of the pictures on the wall to prevent them from taking it. And at this point, he's sort of in full view of them, whereas before he's always been hiding. And it sort of freaks them out. And I think that's where the second. Oh, his father comes in. I think it's at that point that his father comes in, and it's strange because he describes his father as. It felt to me a very Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka, where he's putting on this, oh, I'm so like sickly and poorly, and I can't work, and I have to be in bed all day, and I'm always so disheveled, and I'm always just like laying around doing nothing because I can't do anything. But at this point, his father shows up, and he's dressed very smartly. He's like dressed like a banker, or like not a banker, but someone who works at a bank. He seems fine. It seems like now that he has to work, like it seems like Gregor was, when he was working for the whole family, his family was content to sort of sit back and be like, oh, well, we can't work. We need you to work for us and provide for us. But now that option's totally gone, because it's been literally a couple months at this point that he's been in this situation. His family have had to go out and fend for themselves, and his father, I guess, has gotten a job and has been capable of work this whole time. But anyways, his father shows up and throws an apple at him, I believe, and they have sort of a scuffle. And this apple that it lodges in Gregor's back and stays there for the rest of the book. like just sort of rots, lodged in his back somehow. And I think that's chapter 2. Now again, I haven't looked up any explanations for the meaning of this book or what. This is all just my raw thoughts. So the third chapter, he's still in this room. The room's getting dirty at this point. It's not being kept as clean. His sister's sort of losing sympathy, or she seems very protective of him in a weird way, but in a selfish way. Like she sees sort of the feeding of him and the looking after him as her responsibility. So at one point, her mother deep cleans the whole room, and she has the sister has a sort of a freaks out about this and says, "Don't you ever clean his room again." And in this third chapter, because the family's looking for sources of income, the mother's doing some sewing. The sister, who's 17, I think, is working as a sort of a salesperson, like a cashier, I would say, at some store. And the father's some sort of a servant at a bank or something. Anyways, but they still need more money. So they rent out one of their rooms to these three gentlemen who seem very strange. They're very proper, and they expect everything done. And although they're just renting out a room, they treat the place like they own the place, and that the actual family who owns it are their servants. Or maybe it's not so much that they treat them like that, but that the family treats them like that and treats themselves as the servants of these people. And it's just very strange. Like, they won't even sit down on their own furniture. They give it to these gentlemen, and then if the gentleman says, "Oh, come sit here," then the mother will come and sit beside him. But they don't know about Gregor. He's sort of been kept in his room this whole time. But at one point, his sister, who has always enjoyed playing the violin, and Gregor said, like, she wanted to get into this conservatory to study music. And he had planned he's like working so hard and saving up that he planned to enroll her in that as a surprise on Christmas Day, which had came and went at this point without him even realizing it. So his sister plays violin. So it's at this point that I think it's the first time since Gregor's transformation that she plays the violin, and the gentlemen hear it, and they're kind of interested. So she comes out into the sort of main living room and starts playing. And while they were initially interested, and once she starts playing, they lose interest. It's not what they thought it would be, or they're not. Anyways, they don't really care for that anymore. But Gregor, who likes this music, likes his sister, leaves the room and unintentionally reveals himself to these three gentlemen, who sort of they don't freak out in the way you would think, like, why you're keeping a giant beetle in this room next to us. But they do freak out in that they sort of verbally attack the father, claiming that, like, how dare he do this. They're leaving. They're giving their notice that they're not going to stay there anymore. But they also said that we're not paying you any of the money for all the time that we've stayed here, and in fact, we might sue you for damages, which is probably the part that bothered me in the most of this whole book. It's just that one line that these people come into their house and sort of take it over. And not only do they take it over, but they're not going to pay for it. And when something happens, they're not going to pay, and they're even going to demand that they have money given to them. And I don't know, I just did not like that part. Gregor, at this point, he hasn't been eating as much the past few pages or longer. He hasn't been feeling himself. Whereas before, he's been sort of injured in various scuffles and is healed. At this point, he seems to be on a downward trend. Um, he once again gets chased back into his room, and the door gets locked. So this whole time, I'm thinking there's going to be another transformation at the end of the book. He's going to come back to sort of his human form, and there's going to be some sort of a realization he's going to have that about work and his job, and how he, before, his job had been his whole life, and then the time when he didn't have to work, when he was an insect, that he would realize that there's more to life than just working, and my family can look after themselves, and I can focus on myself, and I don't know. That's sort of where I seen this going. But after these three gentlemen leave, because the father eventually chases them out, the sister, Greta, she sort of has a breakdown and is like, look, this thing that we've been keeping, it's not my brother. Like, it's been months and months and months, and we can't keep pretending that this is my brother. We have to get rid of him. And the family's like, yeah, we have to get rid of him. Get rid of it. And so while they're trying to figure this all out, one day the maid, I guess she is, opens the door to Gregor's room, sees him lying there on the floor, thinks he's like sleeping, sort of pokes him, and then like shoves him around with the broom, and is like, oh, he's actually dead. It tells the family, so they all go see, and oh, okay, he's dead. Then they're like, well, I guess that's for the best. And at the very end, the maid comes in and says, well, then, that thing in there, you needn't worry about how to get rid of it. That's all been sorted out. But she says it in a way that she seemed really, really happy and excited. She stood in the doorway with a smile on her face, as if she had some tremendous good news to report, and would only do so if she was clearly asked to. So I thought, oh, this is when he's transformed back into a human, or maybe like the cockroach thing was just a cocoon, and while it died, he was sort of reborn from it or whatever. But no. So she makes that sort of strange comment. I think this is something that I've totally missed and it's totally blown me by. But she mentions like, oh, you don't have to worry about dealing with the body anymore. Anyways, the family's like, what are you talking about? Okay, thanks, leave. And then the family, it says they go on to get another house, because this one was too big and too expensive for them now, and they each have sort of various jobs, and so they have to find a house that's closer to sort of their work and is more convenient for them and whatever. So that, I guess, it sort of ends with them all going sort of, I guess it's the family who sort of have a new life at the end of this without Gregor. There's sort of a reinvigoration of the daughter, or the sister especially. The last line, it says, and he thought of how their daughter was blossoming into a well-built and beautiful young lady. In confirmation of their new dreams and good intentions, as soon as they reached their destination, Greta was the first to get up and stretch out her young body. So it seems like, I don't know what's the takeaway for this, but it seems like it's not about Gregor, it's about his family and how he was holding them back, or even holding them hostage in a way, as the primary caregiver. While he was working, his father was sort of declining and decrepit, and his mother had health issues, and the sister sort of, she enjoyed music, but she spent most of her time sort of lounging around and just doing whatever and not really having purpose or meaning in life. And once he was gone, once he transformed and was eventually gone, they had to sort of face reality and deal with things on their own, and thus sort of were reinvigorated. had a new lease on life, and went out and lived happily ever after with sort of a son slash brother now dead and gone and forgotten, and their lives all the better for it. I don't know. Also, I don't know if it's a translation thing or a cultural thing, but like the line "stretch out her young body," and another earlier line when he talks about his sister, how she's not wearing collars or necklaces anymore because of where she's working, that he wishes he could climb up and like kiss her on the neck, which I don't know if families do that, but that just seems very strange to me. So yeah, that was Metamorphosis. Very strange. I feel like it's because I'm dumb, and I'm sure I could Google what is this book all about, this novella, and get immediately be like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. Why didn't I think of that? But anyways, that was what I thought of it for the first time reading it, knowing nothing about it, still kind of knowing nothing about it. It's just a short story about a man who transforms into an insect and how his family have to deal with that, I guess. But it's sort of it's not it's sort of from his perspective. It's not first person, but it's yeah, it's from his perspective, but it's not. I don't think it's about him. I don't think. I think it's about. I don't know. I don't know. That's it. That's Metamorphosis.